A faded photograph rests inside a dusty wooden frame. At first glance, it is nothing more than a smiling family frozen in time. A mother holding her youngest child, a father standing tall behind them, and two children sitting calmly in front. The sunlight falls softly across their faces, making it seem warm, ordinary, almost comforting. But photographs are never just images. They are silent witnesses. They hold secrets long after the people in them are gone. As the camera slowly zooms in, the warmth begins to feel uneasy. The air around the photo seems heavier, as if something inside it doesn't want to be seen. The child's hand, small, delicate, and innocent, suddenly becomes the focus. What is the child holding? Why does it not belong there? And why does the family look so unaware of it? Historians say that some pictures carry memories darker than death itself. This may be one of them. The closer we look, the more the photograph begins to feel like a warning rather than a memory. This is not just a family portrait. It is a doorway into something deeply disturbing, something that should never have been captured on film. And once you see it, you may never look at family photos the same way again. If you enjoy stories that blur the line between history and horror, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Comment below where you're watching from, your city, your country, or even just your time zone. Now, let's dive deeper into what this photograph really reveals. The photograph is believed to have been taken in the late autumn of 1892 in a remote farming settlement tucked deep within a mist-choked valley that rarely appeared on official maps. The land around it was harsh and unforgiving, filled with withered cornfields, twisted oak trees, and a river that locals whispered had swallowed more souls than it ever released. The family in the image was said to have lived miles away from the nearest town, cut off from society by both distance and choice. No roads led directly to their property, only a narrow dirt path that wound through dense forest where sunlight barely touched the ground. Those who passed near the area claimed they felt watched, as if unseen eyes followed every step. In that isolation, the family built their lives in silence, surrounded only by wind, wildlife, and something far more unsettling that people dared not speak about openly. Records suggest that the photograph was taken by a traveling photographer who wandered from village to village documenting families before modern technology erased the need for his craft. He reportedly arrived at the property after being told that no outsiders were welcome, yet something compelled him to continue. Neighbors later said they warned him not to go, insisting that anyone who stayed too long near that house never returned the same. When he finally reached the farmhouse, he described the building as leaning slightly to one side, its paint peeling like dead skin, its windows dark even in broad daylight. The air around it was heavy, thick with a scent that mixed damp earth, decay, and something burnt. Despite his unease, he set up his camera, believing this would be an ordinary portrait that would soon be forgotten among hundreds of others he had captured. The family posed in front of the house rather than inside it, which historians later found peculiar. Most families of that era preferred indoor portraits that displayed their furniture, status, and stability. Instead, the parents stood rigidly beneath a broken porch roof while the children sat on worn wooden steps. Behind them, the farmhouse loomed like a silent observer rather than a home. The sky above was overcast, heavy with clouds that seemed frozen in place, refusing to move. Even in daylight, the scene appeared strangely dim, as though the sunlight itself hesitated to touch the family. Experts who later examined the image noted subtle shadows that did not match the direction of the light, suggesting that something else might have been present at the moment the shutter clicked. Local archives indicate that the family had lived in the valley for generations, yet almost nothing was recorded about them beyond scattered names in church ledgers. They were known to keep to themselves, rarely attending gatherings, funerals, or celebrations. Some townsfolk claimed the family practiced strange rituals tied to the land, while others insisted they were simply fearful of outsiders. Children from nearby villages avoided the area entirely, convinced that spirits wandered the fields at night. Elders told stories of lights flickering in the farmhouse long after everyone inside was supposed to be asleep, and of whispers drifting across the water when the wind was still. This photograph, therefore, was not just a family portrait, but a rare glimpse into a household that had always existed on the edge of reality and myth. The traveling photographer later vanished shortly after taking the image, adding another layer of darkness to its origin. His camera was eventually found abandoned near the riverbank, carefully placed on a rock as if set there intentionally rather than dropped in panic. The glass plate negative that produced the family portrait remained intact, yet every other photo from his journey had been shattered or destroyed. No one could explain how the camera survived, but its contents did not. Some believed the valley itself rejected his presence, preserving only the image of the family as a warning to anyone who dared to look too closely. Others whispered that the family allowed the photograph to exist for reasons far more disturbing than simple remembrance. Over time, the image resurfaced in a forgotten attic decades later, discovered by a distant relative who had no connection to the valley. Dust coated the frame so thickly that the faces were almost invisible until cleaned. When the photo was revealed, those who saw it reported an immediate sense of dread, as though the people inside were still watching them across time. The discovery reignited old rumors about the valley and its inhabitants, prompting researchers to trace the picture back to its eerie birthplace. Every clue pointed toward that isolated farmhouse, now long abandoned and swallowed by overgrown wilderness. Today, the photograph stands as more than a relic of the past. It is a haunting artifact that captures not just a family, but an entire atmosphere of fear, secrecy, and unspoken tragedy. The exact moment it was taken remains frozen in history, yet its true meaning continues to ripple through the present, drawing in viewers who sense that something within the frame should never have been preserved. At first glance, everyone who encountered the photograph insisted that it appeared completely ordinary, almost disappointingly so. The parents stood stiff but composed. The children sat quietly, and nothing in the setting screamed danger or tragedy. Museum archivists who later handled the image admitted that they nearly catalogued it as just another forgotten rural portrait. Yet something subtle lingered beneath the surface, a barely perceptible disturbance that many viewers could not immediately articulate. Some described an odd tightness in the mother's smile, as though she were forcing warmth she did not feel. Others noticed that the father's eyes did not seem to meet the camera directly, but drifted slightly to the side as if he were aware of something just beyond the frame. These impressions were dismissed at first as mere projection, but they planted the earliest seeds of doubt. When researchers placed the photograph under high-resolution scanning, the unease deepened. Tiny irregularities began to emerge that the naked eye had missed. The youngest child, seated in the front, appeared slightly misaligned with the rest of the family, as though not entirely belonging to the same moment in time. Shadows around the child's body behaved strangely, bending in ways that defied natural light. Photoanalysts debated whether this was a flaw in the original glass plate or evidence of tampering, yet no signs of manual alteration were found. The child's posture was also peculiar, not relaxed like the other siblings, but stiff and carefully arranged, as if posed by an unseen hand rather than by the photographer. Neighbors who later recalled the family said the youngest child had always been different, quieter and more distant than the others. Some claimed the child rarely played outside and was often seen staring into empty fields as if watching something invisible. When people compared those memories to the photograph, they began to believe that the image captured more than just appearance, but a psychological truth. The child's expression, once thought neutral, now seemed hollow, almost detached from the scene. The smile was not genuine but carefully placed, like a mask meant to conceal something deeply troubling beneath. As more viewers examined the picture, they started noticing patterns in how they reacted to it. Many felt an instinctive discomfort the longer they stared, particularly when their gaze lingered near the child. Some reported chills, others claimed a sensation of being watched in return. Psychologists who studied these reactions suggested that the brain was subconsciously detecting inconsistencies in facial expression, body language, and composition. Yet this explanation felt insufficient to those who believed the photograph carried something darker, something that could not be measured by science alone. The first truly disturbing detail emerged when a restorer digitally enhanced the image to correct fading. As contrast increased, faint outlines became visible around the child's hands and shoulders. These shapes did not resemble clothing or natural shadows. Instead, they looked almost like impressions of something standing just behind or beside the child. The outlines were blurred, as if in motion at the exact moment the camera captured the scene. Some observers interpreted them as nothing more than photographic noise, but others felt they hinted at an unseen presence interacting with the child. Local historians revisiting the image began to connect these visual anomalies to old stories about the valley. They recalled tales of spirits attaching themselves to vulnerable children, guiding or influencing them in dangerous ways. In this context, the photograph no longer looked like a simple family keepsake, but a possible visual record of something far more sinister. The strange alignment of the child, the unnatural shadows, and the unsettling expression all seemed to point toward a hidden reality embedded within the frame. By the time investigators fully accepted that something was wrong, the photograph had already circulated widely, leaving an emotional imprint on countless viewers. What had once been dismissed as an ordinary family portrait was now seen as a deeply troubling artifact. The first strange detail was not just a visual clue but a gateway, forcing anyone who looked closely to question what they were truly seeing and what might have been present in that isolated valley at the exact moment the shutter closed. When investigators finally focused their attention directly on the child's hand, the atmosphere around the photograph shifted from eerie to outright disturbing. What had once appeared to be a casually resting palm now looked tense, fingers slightly curled as if gripping something that should not have been there. Under magnification, the surface of the image revealed fine textures that suggested the child was not simply holding an ordinary object, but cradling something unnatural. The lighting on the hand did not match the rest of the body, creating a subtle glow that made it stand apart from the scene. This single detail drew viewers in like a trap, compelling them to stare longer than they ever intended. Digital enhancement brought the object into clearer focus, and what emerged sent shockwaves through historians and analysts alike. Nestled within the child's fingers appeared to be a small, dark shape, roughly the size of a child's toy, yet far too irregular to be man-made. Its surface looked organic, almost leathery, with faint ridges that resembled veins or roots rather than fabric or wood. Some experts initially claimed it might be a dried animal relic, but the more they studied it, the less confident they became. The shape seemed to shift slightly depending on how the light was adjusted, as if resisting being fully understood. As contrast levels were increased, tiny reflective points appeared across the object's surface, resembling eyes or beads of moisture that glimmered unnaturally. These glints did not behave like normal reflections from glass or metal, but pulsed faintly in different frames of the scan. Observers described a creeping sensation that the object was somehow aware of being watched. The child's grip tightened just enough to suggest possession rather than curiosity, as though they were protecting something dangerous rather than simply holding it. Forensic imaging also revealed faint markings etched into the object that could not have been seen in the original print. These markings curved in twisted spiral patterns that reminded some analysts of ancient symbols tied to protection or invocation. Others interpreted them as signs of something far darker, possibly linked to rituals meant to bind spirits or channel unseen forces. No known cultural artifact matched these markings, deepening the mystery and fueling speculation that the object did not originate from the human world at all. The positioning of the child's hand raised even more questions. Rather than resting naturally on their lap, the hand was elevated slightly, as if the child wanted to display the object without drawing attention to it. Meanwhile, none of the other family members appeared to react, their expressions frozen in calm indifference. This contrast made the scene feel staged in a deeply unsettling way, as if only the child was truly aware of what they were holding while the rest remained blind or complicit. Some paranormal researchers argued that the object resembled descriptions of items used to house or trap spirits, often carried by children in old folklore. They pointed out that children were historically believed to be more susceptible to unseen influences, making them ideal vessels for such objects. In this light, the photograph transformed from a simple portrait into a chilling visual record of something potentially otherworldly resting casually in a child's grasp. As viewers continued to zoom in and analyze every pixel, the object grew less like a mere curiosity and more like a presence of its own. It no longer felt static within the frame, but alive in a quiet, terrifying way, embedded permanently in that frozen moment between innocence and darkness. None of the adults in the photograph appear to acknowledge what rests in the child's hand, and this absence of reaction has troubled researchers more than the object itself. The mother gazes toward the camera with a carefully constructed calm, her posture rigid, her shoulders unnaturally still, as if she has trained herself to look past something she knows is there. Her smile does not reach her eyes, and in high-resolution analysis, faint tension can be seen around her jaw, suggesting an effort to suppress fear or recognition. Viewers later remarked that her expression feels less like ignorance and more like forced denial, as though acknowledging the object would invite something far worse than silence. The father's stance deepens this unease, because he does not look at his children the way a protective parent normally would. Instead, his gaze drifts slightly beyond the frame, as if he is intentionally avoiding the space where the child sits. Shadows fall unevenly across his face, making one eye appear darker than the other, giving him a detached, almost hollow presence. Some analysts believe this suggests psychological withdrawal, a survival mechanism in which he chooses to pretend the disturbing reality before him does not exist. Others argue that his body language hints at awareness paired with helplessness, as if he knows something is terribly wrong but feels powerless to intervene. The older siblings compound the mystery through their stillness, sitting too perfectly upright for children of their age. Their hands rest neatly on their knees, and their faces are devoid of curiosity, fear, or surprise. In normal family portraits, children often fidget, glance around, or lean toward one another, yet here they appear unnaturally controlled. This has led experts to speculate that they were coached or conditioned to ignore the youngest child entirely. To some, this suggests a family dynamic shaped by long exposure to something deeply unsettling within their home. Local oral histories, collected decades after the photograph was taken, claim the family practiced strict silence about anything unusual in their lives. Neighbors recalled that if a child saw something strange, they were told not to speak of it, not even to each other. This cultural backdrop makes the family's apparent unawareness in the image feel less accidental and more deliberate. It raises the chilling possibility that the parents had grown accustomed to disturbances and chose to treat them as normal rather than confront them. Photo specialists have also noted that the composition of the image seems subtly orchestrated to divert attention away from the child's hand. The parents stand slightly off-center, drawing the viewer's eye upward, while the older children frame the youngest in a way that conceals rather than highlights them. This has fueled theories that the photographer may have been instructed, consciously or unconsciously, to minimize the object's visibility. Whether this was an act of protection, fear, or complicity remains unclear. Psychological researchers examining audience reactions found that most people initially focus on the adults before noticing the child. This mirrors the family's own behavior within the image, as if the photograph itself teaches viewers to ignore what is most dangerous. Some theorists suggest this effect is not coincidence, but evidence that the scene was structured around avoidance, reinforcing the idea that the family lived in a constant state of quiet repression. As the image circulated and scrutiny intensified, the family's lack of reaction began to feel less like ignorance and more like a collective pact. Their stillness, their redirected gazes, and their unnatural composure together create a haunting impression that something deeply forbidden existed among them, tolerated but never acknowledged. Around the valley where the photograph was taken, stories had circulated for generations, long before the family ever posed in front of their crumbling farmhouse. Elders spoke in hushed voices about an old presence tied to the land itself, something older than the trees, older than the river, and older than any human settlement. They claimed that at night the wind carried whispers that did not belong to the living, drifting through cornfields like breath from an unseen mouth. Children were warned never to wander too far after sunset because the ground itself was said to shift beneath careless feet. Some swore they saw figures standing motionless at the edge of the forest, watching homes with hollow patience. These tales were dismissed by outsiders as superstition, but those who lived there knew the fear behind them was real. Local folklore centered heavily on the river that bordered the family's land, a slow-moving body of water that appeared calm but was believed to be a gateway between worlds. Villagers claimed that anyone who stared too long into its dark surface would see reflections that did not match reality. Fishermen avoided certain bends in the water, insisting that something lived beneath the current, pulling at boats when the moon was full. In winter, when the river froze, people said they could hear knocking from underneath the ice, as if something trapped below wanted to be released. Over time, the river became less a natural landmark and more a sacred boundary that no one dared to cross without ritual or prayer. Tales also spoke of a wandering spirit known only as the Silent Keeper, described as neither human nor animal, but something in between. According to legend, it attached itself to vulnerable families who lived in isolation, especially those with young children. Some claimed it appeared as a shadow that lingered just behind the youngest child in a household, never fully visible but always present. Others said it could take physical form through objects found in nature, disguising itself as a trinket or relic. People believed that once the silent keeper chose a family, it never truly left them, even after death. Several villagers recounted tragedies that seemed connected to this presence long before the photograph existed. A child from a nearby farm reportedly vanished without a trace after being seen talking to something in the woods. Another family experienced a series of unexplained deaths, each occurring exactly 1 year apart. In every case, witnesses mentioned strange items appearing in the victims' hands shortly before their demise. These incidents fueled the belief that the valley demanded sacrifices, and that certain families were chosen unwillingly to fulfill that grim role. The farmhouse in the photograph sat at what locals called a thin place, where the boundary between the living world and whatever lay beyond was said to be dangerously weak. People avoided passing too close, claiming that time felt distorted there, as if minutes stretched into hours. Travelers reported hearing footsteps behind them when no one was present, or feeling cold breath against their neck despite warm air. Over decades, this reputation turned the family's property into a place of quiet dread that few dared to approach. When the photograph later resurfaced, many villagers immediately linked the strange object in the child's hand to these legends. To them, it resembled descriptions of artifacts used by the silent keeper to anchor itself in the physical world. Some even believed the child in the image had been chosen as a vessel, explaining the family's rigid composure and apparent avoidance. What outsiders saw as coincidence, locals interpreted as proof that their stories had always been true. As historians pieced together these fragmented tales, the photograph no longer stood alone as a mysterious image, but became part of a much darker narrative woven into the valley's history. When the photograph reached academic circles, it was first placed before a panel of historians who specialized in late 19th century rural life. They examined every inch of the image, not just as a visual artifact, but as a cultural document shaped by fear, isolation, and belief systems of the era. Several historians argued that the object in the child's hand could not be understood through modern logic alone, because families of that period often interacted with spiritual traditions that blended religion, superstition, and survival. One historian noted that children were frequently used in rituals meant to protect homes from unseen dangers, suggesting that what the child held may have been considered sacred rather than sinister at the time. Yet even these experts admitted that nothing in their archives matched the disturbing texture and form of the object visible in the photograph. Photoforensic specialists were then brought in to analyze the physical structure of the image itself. Using advanced scanning techniques, they mapped light, shadow, and depth across the child's hand and the object it held. Their findings were deeply unsettling, as the object appeared to cast a shadow that did not align with the primary light source. This led some analysts to suggest that the item may have existed partially outside normal physical reality at the moment the photograph was taken. Others proposed that the camera might have captured something invisible to the human eye, but still capable of interacting with light in unpredictable ways. No consensus was reached, leaving the scientific community divided between technical explanation and metaphysical possibility. Anthropologists studying regional folklore compared the object to ritual items described in oral traditions passed down through generations. They pointed out similarities to talismans believed to house protective spirits, though those were usually carved from wood or bone rather than resembling the organic, almost living form seen in the image. One anthropologist suggested that the object might represent a corrupted version of such a talisman, intended not to protect, but to bind something dangerous to the family. This theory aligned with local legends about the silent keeper attaching itself to vulnerable children through physical artifacts. Still, no known culture in the region had ever recorded something that matched the exact appearance of the object. Paranormal researchers approached the photograph from a very different perspective, treating it not as history, but as evidence of contact with another realm. They argued that the faint glowing aura around the child's hand indicated an energy field commonly associated with spiritual entities. According to them, the object was likely a conduit through which a presence could interact with the physical world. Some even claimed that when the image was displayed in dark rooms, viewers reported sudden temperature drops and feelings of being watched. While mainstream scholars dismissed these claims as psychological rather than factual, they added another layer of unease to the ongoing debate.